Today I'm going to cover everything you need to know about charging the Kia EV9. I'm going to cover topics like the different charging levels, how long it takes to charge, how many miles per minute you're going to get charging depending on what type of charging station that you're using, what type of connectors are used, what adapters you might want to buy, and even how to charge your Kia EV9 on Tesla charging stations. With that said, let's get into it. So first we're going to talk about connectors. The 2024 Kia EV9 uses a connector called the J1772 connector to charge on AC. That's the lower powered electricity. It's called alternating current. For DC charging, which is direct current, that's the high speed charging that charges the vehicle really fast when you're on road trips. It uses a connector called the CCS1 or combo plug. Now, you may have seen in the news that the industry here in North America is transitioning from the J1772 for AC charging and the CCS1 combo plug for DC charging. And it's transitioning to the North American charging standard called the NACS for short. And it's a connector that was developed by Tesla. And that connector you use to charge on both AC and DC. You don't need two different connectors as we do currently here in North America and what the Kia EV9 is currently using. That transition is going to happen over the next 3 or 4 years, where all the newer vehicles are going to have a North American charging standard inlet, and that's the connector that they'll use. But you don't have to worry if you buy an EV9 today that your vehicle is going to be outdated, because there's adapters that will allow NACS vehicles to charge on CCS1 stations and CCS1 vehicles like the EV9 to charge on stations with the North American charging standard connector. So don't stress out over the fact that the current Kia EV9 has a charging inlet that uses connectors that are being phased out. Okay, with that aside, now let's talk about the different types and levels of charging. So I mentioned earlier that there's AC charging and DC charging, and the AC charging is lower powered, slower charging. It's kind of what you would do at home. There is public chargers that are AC, but most people charge at home, and they'll be using AC power. That's what your house has, alternating current. The DC chargers are the super high speed chargers that allow you to charge really quickly and enable long distance traveling. So let's cover the AC chargers first. There's 2 levels of AC charging, level 1 and level 2. Level 1 charging is when you charge from a simple household outlet. A regular 120 volt household outlet, you can plug a level 1 charger into that and charge your EV. The only issue with that is it doesn't deliver a lot of power, so it takes a long time. Most people that have electric vehicles like the Kia EV9 with large battery packs won't charge on level 1 regularly. Some people make it work. If you don't drive a whole lot, you can get away with charging on level 1, but the vast majority of people, when they install charging equipment at their home, are going to want to charge on level 2 because it's a lot faster, from 5 to 10 times faster. And which brings me to the standard equipment on the Kia EV9. Kia provides its customers with the EV9 with a level 1 charger. It's a simple charger, small portable unit here that plugs into a regular household outlet. You can plug this into a regular household outlet and charge your Kia EV9. However, you're only going to get somewhere around 2 to 4 miles of range per hour of charging. Because it doesn't deliver a lot of power. Now you can use it in a pinch, and it's good to keep this in the back of your vehicle, and that's where it's stored in the rear hatch of the vehicle. That's where Kia puts it, and actually has some Velcro on the bottom to keep it nice and tight in the back so it doesn't slide around while you're driving. So it's good to have in a pinch if you're somewhere and you really need to plug in an emergency. You're just going to be there for a while. But that's level 1 charging, and you're supplied with a level 1 charger. Now if you were one of the early adopters and you reserved your Kia EV9 within the first month that Kia opened up reservations in late 2023, they actually gave you a better unit. you have the Webasto dual voltage charger. And by dual voltage, it can charge very slowly from a regular 120 volt outlet with this adapter here. This adapter plugs into the unit like this. And then you could see here, it's a regular 120 volt outlet. It'll charge just as fast or as slowly as the one that Kia gives now. Or you can remove that adapter and plug in this adapter. And when you do that, this is a 240 volt plug called a NEMA 1450. And if you have a NEMA 1450 outlet, like I have back here, this charger's plugged into that. Now this can deliver 32 amps at 240 volts. Now you compare that to the maximum of 15 amps at 120 volts. And you can see, well, you can see if you understand how this works, the power that gets delivered to the vehicle is always amps times volts. So if you multiplied 120 volts times 15 amps, actually it's probably only going to deliver about 12 maximum. 120 volts times 12 amps, you see the power draws a little more than 1 kilowatt, a little more than 1,000 amps, which is 1 kilowatt hour. It's like 1.2, 1.3 kilowatt. And this here can deliver 240 volts times 32 amps, which is 7.7 kilowatt. So it can charge 7 times faster than the when you use it with the 120 volt plug. So you can see it'll charge your electric vehicle much faster, whereas the 120 volt charger will take days to fully charge a Kia EV9, and we'll go over that later, the time to charge. This unit here will charge it in a matter of hours. And again, we'll cover that when we go over all the different charging speeds. But so you can buy this now as an accessory. If you weren't one of the early adopters and you didn't order your EV9 the first month that it was available, this is available from your dealers. However, I did a little research on that, and typically, as with many things you get at a dealership, they charge much more than what you can pay for this when you buy it somewhere else from a third-party supplier. Matter of fact, Amazon has it, I think, for like $250 less, right around there, than what you would pay if you ordered it from a dealership. Same charger. So I'm actually going to drop a link in the description of this video if you do want to buy the dual voltage portable Webasto charger for your EV9. You could click on that and order it right off Amazon and get a good price on that. But honestly, even the Webasto unit, dual voltage unit, isn't really as fast as many EV9 owners are going to want when they charge at home. As I mentioned, that delivers 32 amps, 7.7 kilowatt to the vehicle. There's faster chargers, and the Kia EV9 can accept up to around 11 kilowatt, which would be a 48 amp charger. So for instance, the Tesla charger I have on the wall here, that's a 48 amp charger. This Grizzle E here is a 40 amp charger. So I think most EV9 owners are probably going to want to get either a 40 amp or a 48 amp home charger, and that will charge your EV9 much quicker. So why don't we take a minute here to look at the different charging speeds and how long it would take you to charge your EV9 depending on which charger you're using. Okay, so first up I need to point out that the Kia EV9 comes in 2 different battery sizes, which will obviously affect how long it takes to charge. The EV9 Lite rear-wheel drive comes with a 76.1 kilowatt-hour battery pack. That's the only model of the EV9 that comes with the smaller battery pack. All other models, the Lite long-range rear-wheel drive, the Wind all-wheel drive, Land all-wheel drive, and GT line all come with a 99.8 kilowatt-hour battery pack. So as you can see, it's significantly larger, and that'll affect the charging time. Okay, with that said, let's talk about the different ways to charge and the times it'll take using each method. I'll go from slowest to quickest. So we'll start off with level 1 charging. As I mentioned, that's regular 120 volt charging. That would be if you were to use the supplied level 1 charging cord that comes with the EV9. If you were to charge an EV9 Lite rear-wheel drive with the smaller battery, it would take 64.5 hours to charge it from 10% up to 100%. And now all other models of the EV9 would take 84.5 hours because of that larger battery pack. So you can see here why most people are not going to elect to use level 1 charging for their daily charging. It's good in a pinch, but for daily charging, most people are going to want to charge faster, which would be level 2 charging, and that's 240 volts. Now there's different chargers on the market that have different power output. So I'm going to use 3 of the most popular power outputs here: 32 amps, 40 amps, and 48 amps, which is the fastest you can charge an EV9 on a level 2 charger. So we'll start off with the slowest. If you have a 32 amp level 2 charger, that puts out 7.7 kilowatts. It'll take 10 hours to charge an EV9 light rear wheel drive, and all other models will take about 13.25 hours. If you have a 40 amp charger, that puts out 9.6 kilowatt of power. The EV9 light rear wheel drive would take about 8 hours to charge from 10% to 100%, and all other models would take about 10.5 hours. And if you have a 48 amp charger, that puts out 11.5 kilowatt, and that's the fastest you can charge an EV9 at. Even if you were to buy a charger that can put out more power, the EV9 won't accept more than 48 amps, so it'll still charge at this same rate. The EV9 light rear wheel drive will take about 6 hours and 45 minutes, and all other models will take about 8 hours and 45 minutes. Okay, well that covers our AC home charging. Now let's talk about DC charging and also charging in public. Well, first we'll talk about public charging. In public, there are AC chargers and DC chargers. The AC chargers are pretty much the same as what you're going to be charging from at home. Most of them, though, are lower powered. Most of them are similar to what the Webasto offers, like 32 amps. Some of them are 40 amps, some of them are higher amps. But typically, when you charge at an AC charger in public, you can expect about 30 or 32 amps. So you would charge on a public AC charger about as fast as you would charge at home on a 30 or 32 amp charger. It adds some miles to the vehicle, but it's not something that you would want to use on a road trip because you'd be sitting for hours in between charging stops. When you're on the road, you want to use DC fast chargers because they work so much faster. You talked about the AC level 1 charger versus the level 2 being so much quicker. DC charging is in a whole nother league. With a DC charger, the Kia EV9, depending on which battery you have, the 76.1 kilowatt battery, the 99.8, they're going to charge at different times. If you have the smaller battery, you can charge from 10 to 80% in about 20 minutes. So, you know, when you're on a road trip, you only have to stop for about 20 minutes and you've added 70% of the battery. Now you do want to typically unplug at 80% because then the vehicle starts charging really slowly. People might say, well, Tom, if I was only there for 20 minutes and I got to 80%, why don't I just stay to 25 or 30 minutes and just be 100%? That's not how charging works on DC. On AC, it charges pretty steadily the whole way until it's close to 100% charged. Then the charging starts to slow down as the vehicle balances all the battery cells out. So AC charging, it's pretty linear. DC charging doesn't work that way. When the battery's at a low state of charge, the vehicle can accept a real high amount of power. But then as the state of charge increases, the power delivery gets lower and lower. Once you hit 80%, it slows up a lot. So the EV9 will actually take longer, much longer, to charge from 80% to 100% than it did to charge from 10% to 80%. So if you're on a road trip, it's not worth staying past 80% unless you need that extra range to get to your destination. Unplug at 80% and move on. Now the larger battery, the 99.8 kilowatt hour battery pack, that will charge from 10 to 80%. It takes a little bit longer because it's a bigger battery pack. It takes about 24 minutes, but that's still very quick. And the EV9 is one of the best charging electric vehicles out there. Very few electric vehicles can charge from 10% to 80% in only 20 or 24 minutes, depending on the battery size. So that's one thing that Kia absolutely got right with all of its electric vehicles, not just the EV9. They have an 800 volt battery architecture that allows it to charge faster than its competition. So there's no competing full-size SUV like this that's all electric that can charge as fast as the EV9, at least not as of today. There's some coming down the road, but here in September of 2024, the EV9 is the best charging SUV that's all electric out there. Next up, let's take a deeper dive into just how fast the EV9 charges on a DC fast charger. We're going to take a look at how long it takes to add miles of range and also how many miles per minute are adding when you're charging on a high-speed 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. Okay, so first up, let's take a look at this graph that I made based on the DC fast charge recordings that I did on a 350 kilowatt EVgo charging station. And I also have to note that this is with a Kia EV9 GT line. Because the other trims have slightly different driving range and the EV9 Lite rear-wheel drive has a much smaller battery, the numbers are going to be different for the different trims. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to test all of them, but most of the vehicles with the larger 99.8 kilowatt hour battery will be very similar to this. Okay, so let's take a look at how long it takes to add miles of driving range. To add 50 miles of driving range, it only takes 6.2 minutes. That's really fast. To add 100 miles, it took me 11.9 minutes. To add 150 miles of driving range, 17.6 minutes. To add 200 miles of driving range, it took 24.6 minutes. That's pretty much the 10 to 80% charging session where we add 70% of the battery. So it does it in about 24 minutes, and that's 200 miles of driving range. Next up, 250 miles of driving range comes in 46.8 minutes. So in less than 50 minutes, you can add 250 miles of driving range if you're on a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. In fact, it's important to note that these numbers are based on a 0 to 100% charge session that I did with the EV9. If you start at a higher state of charge, you're not going to see the exact numbers that I'm displaying here. If you want to achieve these numbers here, you have to start at a very low state of charge, under 10%. Okay, so next up, let's look at how many miles of range per minute are added to the EV9 GT line on a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. Okay, so in the first 10 minutes of charging, I averaged 8.4 miles for every minute of charging. From the 10-minute point to the 20-minute point, 8.6. So the first 20 minutes of charging, I averaged over 8 miles of range added for every minute of charging, and that's actually outstanding. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the higher the state of charge, the slower the charging gets. You'll notice from the 20-minute to the 30-minute charging point, now we're down to 5 miles of range per minute. That's still not that bad. And this is the important point here, because after 30 minutes of charging, we've hit the 80% state of charge point. And at that point, as I mentioned earlier, that's when DC fast charging really slows up. Look at how many miles per minute are added from 30 minutes to 40 minutes of charging, and then from 40 minutes to 50 minutes of charging. 1.8 miles a minute and 1.5 miles per minute. So you can see just how much DC fast charging slows up. Once the vehicle reaches that 80% charge point, it has to charge real slowly because you don't want to overcharge any of the cells. Consequently, as I mentioned earlier, you really don't want to stay at a DC fast charger beyond 80% state of charge unless you really need to in order to get to that destination you're going to or to the next charging station. State of Charge is powered by Qmerit. After I've helped you decide which electric vehicle charging equipment you're going to buy, follow the link in the description of my videos and let the EV charging installation professionals at Qmerit install it. Now, there is one thing I need to mention about DC fast charging. How quickly the vehicle charges depends heavily on whether or not the battery is at the right temperature to accept the maximum power that it can take. It doesn't affect AC charging as much. AC charging will be slightly slower if the battery pack is very cold or extremely hot, but with DC fast charging, it's a lot more temperamental, and it will take longer if the battery's not at the right temperature. Well, how do you get it at the right temperature? How do you even know what temperature your battery pack is? You don't have to worry about that because Kia has that figured out. In the infotainment system, you can access a screen that allows you to do battery preconditioning. And there's two ways to do battery preconditioning. You can go through the infotainment system and manually start battery preconditioning as you're on your way to the DC fast charger, Or if you set the DC fast charger as a destination in your navigation system, and don't just put the address in, it has to be, the vehicle has to know it's going to a DC fast charger, and you use that as your destination, the vehicle will automatically start preconditioning the battery to warm it up or cool it down to get it at the right temperature. So when you arrive, you can make the shortest stay possible. Now you need to give it some time. You can't do it just 5 minutes before you're at the charging station, because depending on how cold or hot the battery is, it could take 35-40 minutes to get the battery at the right temperature. It really is more for the cold weather. There'll be few instances, unless you live in an extremely hot area, where it's going to cool the battery down a lot before you DC fast charge, because typically the batteries like to be warm when they DC fast charge. They like to be somewhere around 80-90 degrees Fahrenheit. So a warm battery is okay, but a very cold battery will really slow down your charging. So if you want to charge as quickly as possible at a DC fast charger, make sure that you initiate battery preconditioning, whether it's manually or through the navigation system. It's not that important with AC charging unless it's incredibly cold and the car's been cold soaking for days outside and the temperature's under 10 degrees Fahrenheit. You won't affect your AC charging rates that much, because pretty quickly it'll warm up enough to accept that charging rate that the AC delivers, which is much lower. We're talking, as I mentioned, somewhere between 7 and 11 kilowatts at a time when you're AC charging. When you're DC fast charging, the Kia EV9 Lite rear-wheel drive has a maximum DC fast charge rate of 235 kilowatts. All other EV9 models have a maximum DC fast charge rate of a little bit lower. It's 210 kilowatts. So with DC charging, the battery is taking in 20 times more power than it does even at the fastest AC charging. And the battery cells need to be at the right temperature or they can't accept all that power. Okay, so let's take a look at the settings inside the EV9. First thing we're going to do is tag over here where it says EV. It also gives you a battery state of charge. I'm down at 19% right now. Okay, what it's showing us here is that there is a charger that's 10.2 miles away. It's at a Chevrolet dealership. We're not going to look at that right now. What we're going to go into are some of the settings. See here it says next departure time. This isn't turned on. What you do is if you turn that on, now you can set a departure time for the vehicle to precondition the cabin for you. And what you do is here is set the temperature that you want the cabin to be. Let's say this is in the winter and I don't want to get into a cold car in the morning. I also want it to have the defroster on. I could set it to 76 degrees and say, you know what? I need to leave for work at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I want that the weekdays, because on the weekends, I don't need my vehicle preconditioned and warm for me to leave, but that's when I leave for work during the weekdays. So I set it at that. Now, what's going to happen is by 7 o'clock in the morning, the vehicle's going to be fully charged and also nice and warm for me in the morning every day when I leave for work. And then there's a second one here that you could set. Let's say you want to have it nice and warm for you when you leave work. You could set the same days and then bring this to, let me see, I want to leave work at 4:30 p.m. Set the temperature back to 76. And now at 4:30 p.m., it's also going to warm the vehicle up for me. Okay, so next let's look at AC charger. So at AC charger, this allows you to schedule charging for off-peak hours. When you click that, you can set a charging schedule. You can charge only during your off-peak hours or prioritize off-peak hours. What difference with that is when you set only off-peak hours, the vehicle will only charge during the hours you set. Some people pay less money to use electricity off-peak. They have a deal with their utilities and they pay less for their electricity. So if you tag that, it will only charge during off-peak hours. But if you hit prioritize, it will mostly charge during that time. But let's say it needs to charge more. Let's say one day you drove the battery down to 0 and you want to charge it up to 100% and your off-peak hour times are only from midnight to 5 a.m. 5 hours might not be enough to fully recharge the vehicle. If you have charge only, it'll only charge during those 5 hours. But if you do prioritize, the car's going to say, wait a minute, we won't be fully charged by 5 a.m. So I'm going to start charging at 8 p.m. And for those first 4 hours, you're going to pay a little bit more for your electricity, but the vehicle will be fully charged the next day. Now, the lower charging current. Now, this is really only if you're having problems. There's sometimes the lines that the chargers are hooked up to, if it's an old electricity in the house and you haven't upgraded your electricity, the wires aren't really as good as they should be. This can cause a problem. Your charger can pull more current than what the circuit is safely allowing. This really shouldn't happen. This only happens really when there's a problem with the outlet, the charger, or the circuit. For instance, one time I went to an overnight bed and breakfast and they let me charge on 120 volts overnight on their outdoor outlet. And it looked really old and I was worried that the circuit wasn't really good. So I lowered the current. I didn't pull the full amount of current that the vehicle could take on 120 volt level 1, and I lowered it down so just to give the circuit a little bit more breathing room. Actually, it could lower it down a little bit lower, even 60% if it's a really old circuit. But you shouldn't have to worry about that often. This is a very unusual circumstance where you're worried that the charger is going to overdraw what the circuit can provide. If it's a properly installed charger or outlet, you really shouldn't have to worry about this. Okay, right here now, charging connector locking mode. This is kind of important. So you can have it on always or while charging. So what happens when you click always, as soon as you click the connector to your vehicle, it's going to lock to the vehicle. You can't remove it unless you unlock the doors. If the vehicle is locked, the charger is always going to be locked. This can be annoying if you do this and you're charging at home, because you'll come out to the garage, you won't have your key with you, and you'll go to unplug the vehicle and it won't unlock. The while charging is better in my opinion, because now while the vehicle is charging, the connector's locked. But once you hit your set point and the vehicle stops charging, the connector unlocks so you can remove it from the car. Another good reason for this is if you're in public charging and you have your vehicle charging and it's completed charging, and you're not back to your car yet. You should always get back to your car. You shouldn't leave your car plugged in when it's finished charging, but it happens sometimes. If the charging connector is locked, nobody else can use that charger, but somebody else might pull next to you, and it might be a charger with 2 parking spaces, and they could use that charger. If the connector's locked, they're going to be angry, first of all, because your car's not charging. They could break it, but if it unlocks and lets them use the connector, some people will unlock it. Some people won't touch other people's vehicles, but some people will say, look, the vehicle's done charging, let me start charging now. And while it's charging only, that lets somebody else use that charger. So I recommend use the while charging, but you might have a different instance where you want it always locked to the vehicle. And then you can also select do not lock at all. Okay, let's take a look at charging limit. Okay, so this is what percentage the vehicle is going to charge to on a DC fast charger. As you can see here, it's set to 80%. That's what I recommend unless you need to get the vehicle a higher state of charge. You can go right up to 100% if you want, but it's going to take a lot longer. If you look here, let's go down to 80%. This gives you an approximate time of how long it's going to take. If you're on a high-speed 350 kilowatt DC fast charger, it would take about 23 minutes right now to charge to 80%. Look how much longer if you go to 100%, 58 minutes. It's more than twice as long just for that extra last 20% of charging. So as I said, unless you really need to fully charge at a DC fast charger, it's really not worth staying the whole time. You should unplug at 80%, move on, let somebody else use that charger. And this is the vehicle to load settings. The Kia EV9 can also unload power as well as it can take in power and charge the battery. We're really not getting into that with this video here today, but since it's here, let's talk about it. This setting here allows you to hold a state of charge so that if you're using the vehicle to load to power other things, the way I moved it here to 60% means that the battery will only export power and let other things use its energy until it hits 60% state of charge. Then it'll shut off, because what you don't want to happen is you forget that you're using your battery to power other things, and it completely drains the battery, and then you can't move or go as far as you want to go. For that reason, they only let you take it down to 20%. You can't even let it drain the battery lower than that. So I think that's a good feature, because some people might forget and put it to 0, and then all of a sudden they got a dead battery and they have to be towed. So this, you could set this to wherever you want, but I would definitely recommend not going probably lower than 30 or 40% unless you know that you have enough energy to get to where you're going or to the next charger. Okay, well, that's pretty much it for this screen. Now let's take a look in the settings. We're on battery conditioning. So this is where you can manually turn on preconditioning to warm the battery for DC fast charging. It's pretty warm out here today. It's around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think the battery is probably at a good temperature. It might not even accept battery conditioning. Let's take a look. Activate. The battery temperature is optimized. Does not need to operate, just as I thought. So it's already at a suitable level, so you don't need to do that. If this didn't say suitable, then you could benefit from preconditioning the battery on the way to the DC fast charger. Next up, let's take a look at utility mode. As it says here, uses the high voltage battery while the vehicle is off to power electric devices such as audio systems, interior lighting, and parked for a long time or while camping. Press the vehicle start button to exit utility mode. It's off right now. This really doesn't have anything to do with charging, so we don't really need to go into that right now. I don't think we need to go into smart regeneration. This is the regenerative braking system and how strong the regenerative braking is, but we should go into this one here, charge started voice alert. So when you plug in your Kia EV9 and it begins to charge, you get a voice alert to say that the charging has started.
Charging started.
This here allows you to turn it off or have that voice low, medium, or high. Okay, well, that's pretty much it for the settings inside the EV9. Now let's take a look at the charge port itself. The EV9 has a motorized charge flap. To open it, as long as the vehicle is unlocked, you press on these 3 tabs here and it's going to open up for you. To close, once you're done charging and have removed the connector, you press this little button on the inside here and the flap closes for you. The charge port also has 4 LED light bars that blink while the vehicle is charging, which display the state of charge in 25% increments. All right, so next up, let's talk about the adapters you might consider buying if you're an EV9 owner. First off, we'll talk AC adapters, and then we'll do the DC adapters. Okay, so why would you need an adapter? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's 2 different charging standards in the US. The current one and the one that the EV9 is using. For AC charging, it's the J1772 connector, which is this connector right here. And for DC charging, it's the CCS1 connector, which is here. So if you come across a charging station, AC or DC, that uses the Tesla connector or the North American charging standard, NACS, you won't be able to charge unless you have an adapter. So if the charger is an AC charger, what you would need is a NACS to J1772 adapter, like these 2 here. These 2 here do the same thing. It's just that this one's a little bit more bulky. You might be able to get it for a little bit less because it's super bulky. So there's a whole bunch of these out there on the market. Tons of companies make them. Some of them are very low quality. So 2 things. Don't buy one simply because it's the cheapest one on the market. If it's the cheapest one you find on Amazon, it's probably garbage. I kind of recommend the Electron adapters when it comes to the NACS to J1772 adapters. They do a really good job with them. They're high quality. And I'll drop a link in the description of this video to the Electron adapters if you're interested. But let's see how this works. So this right here is a Tesla or NACS connector. You'd plug this in from the charging station, and now you plug this end in take the cap off first, of course, to your charge port on your EV9. Now, the one thing I have to stress is the EV9 can accept 48 amps. We talked about that earlier, up to 11.5 kilowatts, somewhere around there. The Tesla chargers can almost always deliver that amount of power. So you don't want the charger delivering 48 amps, the car accepting 48 amps, and in the middle here, something that isn't designed to handle 48 amps, because these things are made in different power settings. So make sure whichever one you get, either this style or this style here that's small, where it connects right in here, and then this plugs into the car, either one, just make sure it can handle at least 48 amps. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem with that. There's some lower quality ones that just can't handle the 48 amps that the charger is going to deliver and the car is going to accept. Okay, so that's for the AC chargers. Now for DC chargers. The standard is changing, as I said, to the NACS connector. So we're at the point now where public chargers are just beginning to install NACS connectors on their DC fast chargers. Very few of them are out there yet. This is September 2024, in case you're watching this in the future. But the Tesla Supercharger network has only NACS connectors. And all of the companies are starting to transition to the NACS and gain access to Tesla Superchargers. Kia does not have access to Tesla Superchargers as of today, but we are expecting the brand to get access sometime in the next couple of months. So if you're watching this in December of 2024 or January of 2025, I think by then, Kia is going to have access to Tesla Superchargers. Then you can charge at Tesla Superchargers. Well, the V3 Superchargers are later. And in order to do so, the vehicle has to be authorized, number one, and number two, you need an adapter. And these are the NACS to CCS1 adapters. Well, there's a few of them on the market. This one is the official Tesla adapter. And this one is made by a company called A to Z. This is called the A to Z Typhoon Pro. It's a nice high quality adapter, and so is the one that you can get directly from Kia, I'm assuming by then, because all the manufacturers, as they gain access to the Tesla Supercharger, they put the Tesla adapter in their accessory store. That's what General Motors, Ford, and Rivian have done to date. So I'm assuming as soon as Kia has access to the Superchargers, you'll be able to buy this through Kia, probably through your dealership. But if you don't want to buy this one, there's another couple of good options out there. The A to Z Typhoon Pro, the Electron Vortex adapter. I'll drop a link to both of those adapters in the description of this video if you want to purchase one of them. And I usually have an active coupon code. Type in State of Charge in the coupon code. As of today, I have it. I don't know when you're watching this video, it might have expired, but I usually get between 10 and 15% off to my followers if they purchase an adapter from Electron or A to Z. Okay, so that's how you get Supercharger access, Tesla Destination Charger access, and just basically how you charge your EV9 from any charging station that has the NACS connector on it. Well, that's it for my How to Charge the Kia EV9 video. If you haven't had enough of me talking about charging the Kia EV9, I also have a video out where I charged it from 0 to 100% on a 350 kilowatt EVgo DC fast charger, and then did a full analysis of the charging session. And if you haven't decided which home charging unit you're going to buy yet for the Kia EV9 or any other electric vehicle, head over to my website, evchargingstations.com, where you can see all of my reviews of the charging stations and even do a one-click purchase of your charger with guaranteed lowest prices on some of the charging equipment. Listen, if this is your first time here at State of Charge, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.